Story 1. One day, alone in my apartment, I decided to order the delivery service. Ordinary story, right? It was still utterly ordinary as the delivery arrived in the lobby and I rode the lift down to fetch it on the basement floor. After that, I walked to the lift to return upstairs. To my delight, the lift has already opened and a man was already in the lift, holding the door and waiting for me. I waltzed in with my food bag, smiled at him and tapped my card on the card reader. It couldn't work. The man then asked me, "What floor?" "5th floor." "Oh, what a coincidence. I'm on the same floor." He tapped his card and pressed the button for the 5th floor, as I made a mental note to ask about my broken card at the apartment office. We rode in awkward silence for a few seconds until we heard a ding and the door opened. We walked out. I felt a very unfamiliar, unsettling sensation, but I couldn't point out what it was. Trying to shrug it off, I walked down the corridor to my unit, taking the usual turns. Turn right once, then turn left until I hit the corner. My unit wasn't there. I stood there stunned for a few seconds before I sprinted back to the lift and retraced my steps. But yes, the unit wasn't there. Then I realized something. The entire hallway was inverted. The usual left is now right, and the usual right is now left. That is the reason of my feeling wholly disturbed. This hallway, this world, is a mirror image of my usual world. Still not understanding what happened, I backed into a corner and tried to make sense of whatever happened, feeling incredibly terrified and unsettled. What the fuck am I experiencing? Yeah, guys. So in an utterly anticlimactic conclusion, it was because I was in the wrong tower. I wasn't used to the basement floor where I picked up my food, so I took the wrong turn and used the lift for the other tower of my twin apartment towers. That's why my card didn't work, and that's why the entire hallway was inverted. But shit, before I realized that this might be the case, that was among the most terrifying moments of my life. Story 2. I was 17. My parents were leaving the house one evening around dusk, just as I was headed to the bathroom to take a shower. I said goodbye as they headed out the door to the garage. I took a shower and got out. As I did, the lights in the bathroom went out. I put a towel around myself and stepped into the hallway. And the lights went out. I stepped into the living room, and the lights went out. I stepped into the laundry room, and the lights went out. I opened the door to the garage. The door was down. It was pitch black, no windows in our garage. And then I heard it. Muffled laughter, more euphoric than sinister. And this was small-town Midwest, so I was baffled and creeped out, but not particularly frightened. I reached for the light switch. No lights. I hit the button for the garage door opener. Up the door went, and there, at the back of the garage, I could now see my two friends, Mike and Todd, who could no longer contain themselves, literally rolling on the floor laughing. They were standing in front of the open breaker box. The shower I just got out of was on the other side of the wall from that breaker box. What happened was this. Mike and Todd dropped by just as my parents were leaving. My parents, who knew them well, told them to just go in through the garage and put the door down. They told them that I just headed into the shower and to have a seat in the living room and wait for me. What these two jokers did instead was head for the breaker box, where they could hear the water running on the other side of the wall. So they waited until it shut off. Meanwhile, they would have observed that my father, meticulous and detailed as always, had carefully and clearly labeled all of the circuits. This, combined with the fact that they had been in my house many times, meant that they could reasonably, and quite accurately, it turns out, guess my path through the house. It just never occurred to them to turn off the circuit for the garage door opener. Story 3. I was alone at home reading Stephen King's Salem's Lot. It was completely dark in the house, with the only light being the lamp next to the sofa where I was sitting. I was about 14 years old. My mum was out for the evening, doing shopping for her small business. I was in the lounge, waiting for her to return so I could help her carry stuff in when she returned. In the lounge, the whole front wall was a French window of 6 wooden frames, with the glass being made of brown circles of glass, like someone had cut the bottoms of dozens of bottles and melted them together. You could see if someone or something was outside, but not who or what. We owned a big dog, a cross between a Rhodesian Ridgeback and a boxer. Her name was Purdy, and she had this habit of sitting down heavily against things. She did not so much sit as collapse. The book was getting to a really scary bit. 2 delivery men were in the cellar of a creepy house dropping off a coffin-sized box. As they lowered the box, something inside shifted and one of the straps broke. At that exact same moment, Purdy collapsed against the French windows with a loud crash, causing the whole front door to shake. I think the book actually left my hands. I jumped so badly. Story 4. I was 14. It was an average night, around 9:00 p.m. Me and my little cousin are at his house. I'm babysitting for the night while my mom and aunt are shopping and my dad and uncle are at the movie theater. So we're sitting there and I was feeling really strange. Something was wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it, so I just kept watching TV with my cousin. The feeling wasn't going away, so I got up and walked to the back door to lock it. When I came back through the kitchen, I saw what was causing my weird feeling. In the window, there was a very decrepit and homeless-looking man. Just staring into the window, looking at my cousin. Protective mode turned on. I pretended like I didn't see the guy, and I told my little cousin that we needed to go upstairs because our parents would be home soon and they wouldn't want him to be staying up late. So I went upstairs and put him to bed, knowing damn well that there was a man outside that wanted in. I was about 125 pounds and 5'8" at the time, and I played football for my school. If I remember correctly, I went downstairs and straight into the kitchen and grabbed one of those meat tenderizing hammers, turned back to the window where I saw him before. Not there. Ran back to the front door and checked that it was locked. Both the deadbolt and the knob were locked. Ran back upstairs with my meat tenderizer and went into my cousin's room and sat down in front of the door. He asked me what I was doing and I said that he didn't need to worry about it and that he should keep his head low. Called the cops and then my dad and uncle. Cops would take half an hour and my dad and uncle were 45 minutes away. Then I hear a window shatter and the sound of heavy boots walking around on the main floor. I told my cousin to stay calm, hide under the covers and to keep silent. I could hear the guy walking around downstairs. It was horrifying. I gripped that damn meat tenderizer and waited. About 5 minutes pass and then I hear the boots walking upstairs. At this point I was having a freaking heart attack. My cousin's door is no more than 10 feet from the stairs. I heard him opening the doors to my aunt and uncle's room, then the bathroom. He walked back downstairs and I heard him open the door to the basement. 15 minutes later the police showed up and burst into the house. Turned out the guy was loose from a mental hospital 1 province away. I nearly had to battle a mental case when I was 14. At one point I was no more than a wooden door and 10 feet away from him. Story 5. My scariest home alone stories happened during one of the first times I was left alone as a teenager. I left alone at home on a random Sunday when my parents brought my brother to some event. I was loving the freedom and everything was going great until I decided to leave my house to see my friend. My parents specifically told me not to leave the house and I did anyways. Not thinking in the moment I left my house and I completely forgot to lock the door. I came home hours later and I had a terrible gut feeling. Something felt weird and I noticed that cabinets were left open and stuff was scrambled around the house. I began to become very startled, but I didn't completely believe that someone was there because it was so quiet. I started shouting throughout the house to see if anybody was there. There was no answer. I started to feel better until my phone started ringing. I looked down and it was an unknown ID. Looking for attention, I answered the phone and I heard deep and heavy breathing. I started to get extremely scared. It felt straight out of a movie. I kept asking, "Who is this?" repeatedly, until the phone hung up. 2 minutes later, I got another call and I answered to the deep breathing. It sounded like an angry voice and I started to become impatient that they weren't saying anything. They hung again and I got aggravated. I got another call from the unknown ID and the breathing started again. Out of nowhere, I heard a deep and quiet voice whisper, "I'm in the house." My heart stopped and chills ran down my spine. I've never been so scared in my life, but I acted tough, thinking it was a prank call from my friend or brother, knowing I was home alone. The caller hung up this time and I started to hear creaking from upstairs and suddenly I heard loud footsteps. Luckily, I heard something drop before he started sprinting downstairs. I was able to get a head start on the intruder and I disappeared into the woods and immediately called the cops. The cops reported and found the door left wide open. They never found the person that snuck in, but I'm lucky to be able to share that wild story. Story 6. I lived in a heavily haunted house. It was a large house and I had 9 roommates. So there was always the sound of people walking around on different levels, opening and closing doors, and talking. It wasn't until I was alone in the house for the first time that I noticed you could hear walking around, opening and closing doors, and talking even when there was no one there. I went down to the basement to play the piano and had a very strong feeling of someone telling me to fuck off. For someone who has never experienced this, just imagine you are in a room with someone who is angry as hell and is screaming and throwing things at the walls. Then just subtract the sound and images. The feeling is the same. I thought I should say something out loud, so I said, "I'm sorry I bothered you. I'll leave now because I respect you as a roommate." It was when I said the word roommate that the feeling stopped and things got very calm. I went back upstairs to my room, feeling very shaky. Maybe I should mention this was probably 2 or 3 a.m., so getting out of the house and going somewhere wasn't really an option. I was sitting in my bed for about 20 minutes when I saw something on my wall. The best way to describe it would be to say that it wasn't visible per se, but looked sort of like when the predator in Predator has its invisibility turned on. It was shaped like a 3-foot-long salamander. It crawled down my wall and up onto my bed and then disappeared.